Welcome to Field Notes for Pastors, a conversational podcast for pastors and others in ministry as we explore our soul-deep work in the fields of the Lord. Whether you're in a ministry season of fullness or famine, we want to explore themes around Paul's words in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. In today's episode, I am so thankful to welcome Asher Imtiaz as we explore topics of seeing, paying attention to the other, and artistic imagination in ministry. Asher was born in Pakistan to a family belonging to a small religious minority and moved to the American Midwest in 2012. Beginning his practice in Milwaukee, his work now extends across the country, engaging themes of migration, belonging, and connection. Asher creates work that seeks to give voice to those often considered other. His photography-based work, informed by this immigrant story, focuses on minorities and people living under societal pressure. Asher's early work documents the religious minority groups of his home country. Since 2016, Asher has focused on developing relationships with recent refugees and asylum seekers, building trust that leads to creating intimate portraits. I am thankful for this chance to join with Asher today because he's been a great conversation partner for me on creativity, care for internationals, and is someone I consider a friend. Welcome to the podcast, Asher.
Thank you so much, Matt. And it's so wonderful that this is my first ever podcast and I'm doing it with you. And so I'm really excited and looking forward to our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I want to just, even though I've given that little bit of introduction, I'm wondering if you can give everybody who's listening a little background on your growing up in Pakistan as a Christian, as a religious minority, and perhaps just a little bit of background in what you're involved in ministry now.
Yeah, I grew up in Pakistan, and I grew up as a Christian, and my family has been Christian for at least 4 generations that I know. And my great-grandfather was a priest. Sometimes I talk to people and they don't realize that, Thomas went to the subcontinent, one of the 12 disciples. So Christianity has been around for 2,000 years. So there are Christians who have been, I know friends who have traced back their Christian roots to 700, 800 years. So I grew up in that Christian family. My parents were committed Christians. I've seen them go to church every Sunday, and I joined. So I attended church all my life. And that's my home was the first place where I understood how to be a Christian. And I've seen my parents, and especially also my uncle. My uncle became a priest and later a bishop in the Church of Pakistan. So they have been influenced in shaping how I see Christian faith. And I can just share one story, which I was just thinking about it, and I remember that what are the early memories I have of exposing myself to ministry. So my mom was an executive of the Pakistan Bible Society for many years, and I remember that she used to visit a lot of places, and one of them was a woman prison in Pakistan. And there is no reason for me to go to a woman prison, but since my mom was visiting and bringing Christmas gifts, so I used to just tag along, and I just see, and I just feel happy that I'm in a place where it's not normal to be there. Yeah, I noticed that seeing my mom visiting and being part of different ministries, that was very essential core memory for me. And then later, I was also joined a ministry. On my academic side, I studied computer science all my life because at that point, everyone was studying computer science, so I was one of them. And I don't know if many people find it funny, but in subcontinent, you're given 3 options when you go to school to either become a doctor or an engineer, and the third is normally failure. So
there's 3 options, and the last one is failure.
Yeah. So computer science was close to engineering. So anyways, I was not a bad student, but At some point, I completed my education and I started teaching in a Christian university. There is only one Christian university right now in Pakistan. And I started teaching there. And when I was teaching there, that's what I wanted to do. And at some point, I said I need to go and get more education. So I applied to a PhD program and moved to Wisconsin. So I came here in 2012. I joined a research lab at University of Wisconsin Milwaukee, and one of my lab mates was an Iranian, and he was basically showing me around Milwaukee. And I remember on the third day, like like a biblical reference, that on the third day I was sitting at Culver's, which is one of the main chains in Milwaukee, and a guy came to Culver's and greeted my Iranian friends, and they introduced me to him, and they said, "Oh, you have a new guy who just joined the university, and he moved this place, and he's a Christian from Pakistan." So the guy was curious that, oh, there is a Christian from Pakistan. And then he asked me like what I'm doing. I said, I just came and I'm looking for a place. And he took me to a home, and that home was of Pastor Mark and Nancy's. And then I realized that the person who was introducing me to this new couple was a missions pastor at church, Eastbrook Church in Milwaukee, where at that point in 2012, you recently became the main lead pastor.
Yep.
So most of my life in America is your life at Eastbrook Church.
We've known each other for quite a while.
Yeah, so I'm just telling you the story because it's gonna come maybe later as well. So I stayed with this couple who were the founding pastors at Eastbrook Church, and so the first Sunday I happened to attend Eastbrook Church, and I met you and other people, and eventually, after completing my education in the US and I started working, and I happened to get a job in Wisconsin as well, then I got more involved in ministry, and I start getting involved with outreach among internationals and refugees. So I grew up as a Christian and was exposed to a lot of ministry, and was also drawing myself closer to God as well. So this transition was sort of like, I would say that is a gift from God, and I count it as one of the major moments in my life that I end up being in this community at Eastbrook Church with this family, meeting all these people. So it was sort of like a continuation of what I was becoming in Pakistan, and like moving to US, and I found the community where I can be.
And you've been engaged with a lot of work with international students as you've been here. I mean, you were an international student and you've been engaged here doing different things with that. And I think about that experience you talked about with your mom of going to the women's prison with her and experiencing something outside of your kind of framework or experience as a young child. And it seems like in some ways that may have been kind of shaping for you. I know when we talk about your photography work, a lot of your early photography work in Pakistan explored religious minority groups in your home country. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how that experience maybe opened your eyes to others, even how it impacted your life of faith as a Christian itself.
So Christians in Pakistan are like almost around 2%. And if you're living in such a small minority and you grow up with that perspective, being aware of visibility and vulnerability and belonging, these things happen naturally because of, like, I'm sure this is the same for other minorities and the experience of other people who live as such a small minority. So some of these things I reflect that I think they were just there by being, part of this small 2% Christian community in Pakistan. So in 2010, I was teaching and doing other things, and a life event happened. And that just prompted me to think about a few things. And I actually bought a camera and went out to see people. And somebody commented that, maybe I'm thinking too rationally and scientifically. So it was also like a self-reflection to see that, can I connect with people? Like, what do I see? It was more like an exploration, and the philosophy came later.
So the photography actually became kind of a personal exploration of kind of your own journey, but also then filtered into some other things as well.
Yeah, so now I can say that, like I started my journey of paying more attention to what I see. But I remember one story that when I wanted to become a photographer or maybe take some photography a little more serious, I remember going to a small tribe which is on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border,
Mm.
and they are called Kalash. They are a tribe which exists for and living there for 2,500 years. That's before Christ, and this is one of the few tribes left from that uh, kind of time. And it's a pagan tribe in the middle of two very strong, like Muslim countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. So I went there and I took a lot of portraits, and I showed it to my friends that I'm taking a lot of portraits. And I realized that was my first photography project. But in the first photography project, I realized that photography might not be my main gift. I think there is something else. And I personally say that my main gift is connection. And if I'm able to connect with a person, a photograph, a
Mm.
portrait, and all these things happen at some point. But I personally think connection is the main gift. And mostly when I frame my conversations, it revolves around connections as well.
Hmm.
Just to complete what you asked me, yeah.
Keep going.
So looking at religious minorities and other people groups, which were, I can say, sort of like under pressure, it became a theme because I was part of that community. So my first attention went to fellow Christians and other small minorities, which are like some Hindus, which who are also like 2% in Pakistan. There's some Sikhs, there are some Zoroastrian, and I talk about these pagan tribes. So somehow my eyes just went towards them, and it was easy for me to connect, and uh, and they were all able to connect with me as well. That what I am trying to do. So I think that's maybe the main reason.
Yeah, it really opened your eyes in some different ways, and maybe even connecting as a minority group within your culture, being able to enter into that and see what maybe you couldn't have seen otherwise. I think of the story in the Gospels of the rich young ruler and coming to Jesus and asking questions. And there's a really fascinating phrase where it says that Jesus fastened his eyes on him, and you kind of have the sense where Jesus is really seeing this young man. And you and I have had a lot of discussions about what it means to really see someone, to really look at someone, to observe things. And I'm wondering if you could try to define or talk about what you think it means to see a person or other situations, and how has your understanding of your faith actually opened your eyes in new ways to be able to see people or see situations?
I think what the things I'm learning through my camera is that everything begins in seeing. And how I talk about it is that what it means to see is that to see is that first you notice things, and then once you notice things, you somehow go to another step and maybe care about those things or people. And after that, uh, maybe that care compels us into some action. So I also think that this journey of photography and connection is it, it is a discipline of attention. It requires you to slow down. It demands you to have spent enough time, because in my case I'm photographing people, and I have shared with this with you before as well, that whenever I meet somebody, I normally don't have my camera. So I have this philosophy that everybody should see me before they see my camera as well. And then at some point, other things happen. In terms of, if I say that I actually seeing person and they're more important than anything else, or photograph or anything else, then they should remain more important. The person should remain more important, and the photograph should not be, and I should be maybe the third in this hierarchy. I think that seeing is not just noticing facts. I think it also means that seeing means like you allow yourself to be changed by what is in front of you. And I can
Hmm.
share a story later with you
Yeah.
about some of those things. And then it's also, seeing require vulnerability as well. It's a two ways. If you're in front of a person, that the person will ask you a question as well. And if I refer or compare some of these things to how I understood some of these things biblically or through the Christian faith, I've spent a lot of time asking questions because, as part of the church ministry I'm involved in, I do alpha courses with international students and other people. So there, I've spent a lot of last 7-8 years just asking questions, and that is basically modeling what Jesus did. He basically asked questions and shared stories. So I think seeing and paying attention and everything, they all start by listening and asking good questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've talked a lot about Jesus' tendency to ask penetrating questions and how powerful that is in opening pathways of connection. You talked before about your photography actually being a subset of your gift of connection, or kind of the sense of calling to connection. And I love those things you mentioned. Seeing is noticing, seeing is being able to be changed and to actually care. Seeing involves this deep vulnerability. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a story or two of when you experienced a situation or a person's story that, as you entered in, maybe it's through the lens of your photography, maybe it's something else that deeply challenged your own ability to see or engage with somebody else. Is there a story or two that you could share?
Yeah, sure. I can share the story where I started my current long term work of documenting refugees and asylum seekers. So it goes back to 2015 and 2016, and this is a time also there is some rhetoric changing towards immigration, and it become like a big issue. It's still a big issue. So I said, okay, I want to talk about these people. I want to get to know these people. I want to see these people. So I decided to move to an apartment building in the south of Milwaukee in the spring of 2016. And that apartment building, I think, had 100 apartments, and most of those 100 apartments were occupied by refugees and asylum seekers from Somalia, from Burma or Myanmar, and Iraq, and some other places. So I moved there with the intention to get to know some people, and partly it was also learning some of the things which I was thinking and wrestling with, that how can this seeing doesn't become a project,
Hmm.
and how can some of these ministry actions doesn't become performance. So it was also like a personal reflection which I know wanted to do that as well. And in some of the conversation with some of the people I had about some of these issues, I didn't want to do something like staying in some area and then showing up like once a month and say, okay, I'm here and I wanted to share the love of Jesus with you, and you need to listen to me. So I said I need to immerse myself, live, and and uh, do something which I now call incarnational attention. And so I moved there, and when I moved there, it was the month of Ramadan. So I stayed there for a month, and I remember that I was taking photos of some of the kids who were living in this apartment building. And at the end of Ramadan, the Eid happened, and on Eid day, I took a lot of photos of kids who were dressed up for the Eid, and I gave a print to those kids. And so next day, somebody knocked at my apartment door. I opened the apartment door, and there was a young Somali girl at the door. And she said that, I've seen you taking photos of people, but you never took my photo. And I told her that, okay, I didn't see you. And she said, okay, that's fine. But I bought a very beautiful red dress, which I want you to take my portrait. And I said, yeah, sure. Let's take a portrait. And that moment, I took a portrait of her that became actually one of the first images I put on a magazine where I published my work. And it was on the cover of that magazine, and the photograph was of a Somali girl wearing red dress and a red hijab. So the magazine is 125-year-old, and as far as I understood by talking to the people who work there, that they never had a Muslim wearing a hijab on the cover of that magazine, Christian magazine. And also, her simple question of, why you didn't see me was something which just stuck in my mind from the start. And then I also realized that, like seeing someone also require time. You need to spend a lot of time. This idea of incarnational attention, living a life of paying sustained attention, actually is what I want to follow and explore. So I stayed there for 3 years.
Yeah, it's a long time of just being present. I love that phrase, incarnational attention. Think of that well-used paraphrase of Eugene Peterson about John 1:14. The word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. I mean, I think you were present there, building relationship. It wasn't just a token, like you said, hey, I'll show up and show you the love of Jesus. You were there and present in the community in a very profound way. I love hearing about that story.
Yeah, and Eugene Peterson actually paraphrased the verse that God moved into the neighborhood. So that was definitely something in my mind. And also at that point, I was reading extensively Henry Nouwen and his book In the Name of Father. So I was reflecting on some of these things which I mentioned, that seeing people should not become like a project, and also doing some action should not become performance. But also it's a incarnational attention. There is another time which I had to question my process and my work, was when George Floyd was killed. I happened to be on that same street with my friend. I was visiting a friend who lived just like a couple of blocks away from where this happened. So I happened to be there on that day. And when these people started gathering and protest started, I was there. And then since I was there and all these things was happening in front of me, I started taking photographs and doing all these things as well. And I remember at that moment, there was a guy who came to me. And this is, by the way, in COVID. So everybody was wearing masks. And this
A
is
very strange time.
yeah. So everybody was wearing masks and I was wearing mask. So a guy came to me and he like was a little aggressive. And he said like, who are you with? Which side you're on? And I took my like mask, and it's easy for me to just say, okay, you can see which side I could be. So, but that question of him asking that which side you're on was also another question which I've, you know, um, reflected on since then as well. That like when you're taking photos or when you're engaging with other people, they're also like full human. They can ask questions as well. And I sometimes um, say that I it's doing art or doing this kind of work which involve other people is hard. I'm sure like other things are hard as well, but I can stand in front of a mountain or a sunset or flowers, and there is morally nothing wrong with taking photos of that, but they will not ask me a question. But once you start stand in front of a person, it's totally different. So as long as far as I am concerned, if I like to see somebody and get to know them, or maybe take their portrait and do something with it, they have to be fully on board with it as well. So this kind of experiences and people asking questions, and then you also reflecting and changing the way you work helps, like you said, gelling the ability to see deeper as well. So it's and also in these scenarios, I'm not saying that I happen to be morally superior than everyone I meet. It's basically your personal processes and flaws and all these things are exposed as well by engaging with the people, and they asking. It also revealed limits to your attention as well, not just the other way. It's
Seeing becomes an encounter.
yeah,
It actually becomes a revelation of who you are too. It sounds like it's been a deepening experience for you, even in your own self-awareness as you've entered into these experiences.
yeah. I think you've used this term in one of the essays you wrote, where you talk about seeing as witness, seeing at different things. But one of those things was seeing as communion. So this was, for example, this George Floyd and this protest. This was a shared experience, and people were suffering. So it's a shared suffering experience, seeing as shared suffering. But we can talk about that. This is a moment of seeing as communion.
There's this relationship. I think when, again, going back to that story of Jesus seeing the rich young ruler, he fastens his eyes on him. And there is this moment of relationship that turns into knowing. It's an opportunity for that young ruler to change, and maybe he doesn't enter into that as much as we would like. Or I think of the story in the book of Acts, chapter 4, where Peter and John are walking to the temple, and the man is begging for money, and Peter says, "Look at us." And there is this seeing encounter that actually leads to a different place. How do you think some of this, I mean, this podcast, we're talking about field notes for pastors or people who are in ministry. How do you think this discussion of seeing even as communion, of paying attention, of being in an encounter, how do you think some of this applies to the work of pastors or those in ministry in relation to churches or a ministry context or an endeavor? Any thoughts you have on that, Asher? I know that that isn't your vocation, but you're engaged in a lot of ministry alongside of many others in our own city. So how would you speak to this applying to ministry settings?
Yeah. So one thing which I just remember from one of your writings, since I go to the same church, so there's so many things which has to do with you sharing it during your sermons or in your writings so I remember you talked about seeing but not seeing as well. There are moments where Jesus didn't see the woman, for example, before he took care of the hypocrisy. So, and then there was other moments like that. So there are moments of not seeing as well. And I actually just realized that recently I'm still thinking about it. So maybe I have to talk more to you about that. That recently somebody asked me to cover and talk about these documented people. So they,
Mhm.
and I have to go to a church where I have to document and and by definition taking a portrait is seeing them and making them visible. And I said, no, I should not do that, and I should find a different way to be able to see them but not see also them.
Hmm.
So that is another thing which is related to the previous question, but I just remember this challenging the ability to see and also questioning that what it means to see and not see in some context.
Mhm.
What I think can be application for pastors and ministry leaders. I mean, like in general, the pastoral work begins. I mean, before preaching or doing anything, it begins at a level of attention, and what that attention do to ministry, and what it has done to me, and I'm still, reflecting and working on it. That it prevent me, and I think it can apply to other people as well. That it prevent us from from making people become like projects.
Hmm.
By actually seeing them long enough, they will not be project.
Yeah.
So the story I mentioned about Samira,
Mhm.
the Somali girl whose portrait I took, she's my friend. I take her portrait every year now since 2016. So she is not a project anymore, she's a friend. Her mom had cooked food for me. So I think first thing, it prevent us, if we live a life of sustained attention and paying attention deeply, is that it prevents people from becoming projects. And then I think one thing which is very crucial right now is in our culture that David Brooks and all these people are writing about it, that we have a crisis of communication. I think he wrote a
Mhm.
book, How to Know a Person or something like that.
Yep.
Um, so that is basically his response to this crisis of communication. And when you pay attention and when you actually ask question and you listen, you go beyond that superficial, like how you're doing, and the other person say good, 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 and you move on, and you keep doing that for every Sunday at church, or
Mhm.
everywhere. So these questions, how are you, and all these things, they maybe have meaning and people listen. So it can help with this crisis of communication,
Yeah.
which is also related to this loneliness epidemic, which people are writing about. I'm not an expert in those areas, but I mean these things are related. But I think one of the main thing is that it interrupts this urgency culture.
Hmm.
Like what I personally experienced as well that, like if I would have been staying somewhere else and wanted to document these people in the south of Milwaukee who, living there, if I would have done it differently, one idea could be that I go there once in a month or twice in a month. So I'm have this urgency or this strong push inside me that I need to do something quickly because I only have half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But being there, by being present, and this handy Norman idea of like ministry of presence, that pressure was off. I'm
Mm-hmm.
there every day,
Yeah.
and things happen. So this interrupting of urgency culture, I think, is one application or one thing which attention can do in ministry. And then also it's in the end, everything we are doing, it has to create a space where God can be encountered through all these things. So
Hmm.
so if I look at all these things as a ministry, so one of my first goal, which I think is that if I'm drawing closer in the knowledge and experience of God or not.
Hmm.
So of course paying attention, seeing other people and they are shaping you and they are changing you is also helping in one of this core.
So much of what I'm hearing you say, it does feel like that ability of how seeing leads to an encounter with another person. I think about the time. Yeah, we are such a culture of urgency in North America. And, we got our schedules. We have the next thing to do. I think of anybody who's a pastor or someone in ministry listening to this, I'm not saying it's not good to have our schedule. It's part of how we have to operate in our world. And yet, sometimes our schedule rules us more than we rule our schedule. And to be able to take time to be present, to linger. One of my other favorite phrases about seeing is lingering and loving attention, love takes time. Love takes involvement. Love takes proximity. I mean, I think that's what's so powerful about your stories of moving into the apartment complex on the south side of Milwaukee and just being there and being available. We see so much of that in Jesus. And I just wonder sometimes for us in ministry, I'm speaking even to myself, are we available like that? Are we actually giving ourselves to people in that way in that encounter? It's powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, like it's impossible for every person to do these things,
Right.
and some of the people has, but I think every one of us can still be part of the culture where these things can happen more and more.
Mm-hmm.
One thing which I remember, by the way, I love this idea of lingering in
Lingering and loving
loving,
attention.
lingering and loving attention. This I love this idea, and I was reading somewhere that most pastoral harm that that doesn't come from like bad theology. It comes from not seeing people long enough.
Hmm.
If you're not seeing, or you're seeing people maybe uh, as an object, or
Yeah.
as like you can also say that as a means to some other end.
Mm-hmm.
So that is also part of seeing as well.
Yeah. So rich in that. And I think about the hospitality involved in some of what you're saying too, Asher, when you described Samira, not just as a project, but as a friend. And then you said, her mother has made me food. Like, I love that description. This is a sense of being invited into each other's lives. One of the things I write about in the book coming out, The Pastor's Gardener, is the hospitality that Jesus experiences with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And I think seeing is a form of hospitality. You are encountering another, you're inviting them in. There's a slowing down, there's presence that you talked about, there's vulnerability. It changes us if we really have this encounter. And I think that's a word to pastors and anybody in ministry is we're not doing ministry. God is doing the ministry, and yet he's also changing us as we serve and walk alongside of him. There's so much of this that's a transformational encounter in so many different ways. And I think our modern mindset of project orientation, getting results, being successful, sometimes gets in the way of that transformation on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I mean, like you are now an expert of pastor as gardener connection. So what I understood from that, I'm looking forward to reading that. But what I understood from that metaphor is that the main thing is to observe and wait and tend and respond, like
Mm-hmm.
if you have to wait, there's a lot of patience, there's a lot of waiting, but then you're also doing active waiting. Like if some animal comes and like try to do something in your garden, you put a fence and all these things. So it's a lot of attention which goes there in that area as well. And yeah, I've been thinking about it, and I personally think attention is a form which love takes when it's slowed down. And I've been thinking about that.
I want to say that again. You said attention is the form that love takes when it slows down. That is so good. I love that.
Yeah, and I've actually, in my current writing, or what I've been reflecting on, is this idea is that to see actually means to stay. I have a friend, Francis Omandi, in Kenya, who we both know for so many years, and he has talked about these ideas of not going but staying, and then I just remember that, and I've been thinking about that, especially in terms of standing before other humans and looking into their eyes, and also allowing them to look back, and then I personally think that's where the sacred begins. I truly think that to see is to stay, and to stay is to love. And love begins before willing to be still.
That's so beautiful. One of the great challenges of this conversation, Asher, is I wish that this wasn't an audio podcast and that we could display your beautiful photography. And so I know that I'm going to put a few things in the show notes, but I want to make sure that we can point people to where your work can be found, because it is so moving. It's so powerful. I had the privilege to watch you do a presentation at the Doxology Gathering last October, and you could have heard a pin drop as people simply viewed your photographs on the screen after you talked, and people were weeping. It's just so powerful. So if people, I'm just so grateful to have you with me, but if people want to take a look at your work, if they want to catch up with what you're doing, what is the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, sure. So I have a website and an Instagram, and it's my name. There's a benefit of having a name which is part from the Bible and part from the subcontinent culture. So it's unique. So it's easy to find me.
Okay.
And also I've been attending the same church for the last 13 years, Eastbrook Church, and I'm mostly available there. So it's easy to find me there as well.
Show up on a Sunday morning and you will find Asher at our church, usually in the final service of the morning, lingering with people afterwards for a long time. I'm just so grateful for you, Asher. I'm grateful for who you are. It's been fun to have conversations over the years. It's been fun to see your work be recognized just for what a wonder it is. And I'm grateful for the way you have taught me to see in some new ways. I'm just grateful for that. So thank you for being with us on the podcast today, and just really grateful for you.
Thank you so much. It was so fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Field Notes for Pastors. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend. Give us a like or subscribe to this podcast on platforms where you listen. This podcast is linked with my forthcoming book, The Pastor as Gardener, a renewed vision for ministry, set to be released by Erdman's Publishing on March 24th, 2026. You can pre-order the book anywhere good books are found. And if you do pre-order the book, I have put together some resources as a gift to you. Find out how to access those pre-order resources via my website, mwerickson.com. Until next time, may you experience God's grace wherever God has planted you.